My name's Melanie Schlotterbeck. I work as a consultant to Coastal Corridor Alliance, formerly Bannock Conservancy, and I'll pass it over to Isabella.
Hi everyone, my name is Isabella and I work with Melanie in coordinating the planning efforts at the Randall Preserve. It's a pleasure to be here today representing the MRCA.
Great, and then Paul and Drew.
Everybody, my name is Paul with the Coastal Corridor Alliance. I'm on Melanie's team, overseeing a lot of the outreach and education aspects of the Randall Preserve planning effort.
Hi, I'm with the Randall Preserve. I'm a UCI fellow, so I do service in various aspects of the preserve.
Perfect. So Paul and Drew are our note takers for today. I don't think we'll do introductions for the audience yet, but when you ask a question later on, we'll have you introduce yourself just so that we can get through our talking and then that piece is over. All right. And Isabella, can you see it? Okay, perfect. All right, so we are holding these office hours to provide you as agencies and partners and interested parties an opportunity to get a preview of what's to come. There are teams that have been hired to do research on the Randall Preserve for the plans, which you'll hear about. And they have very specific people they are reaching out to, so we are reaching out to everybody else. So you are in the category of CCA and MRCA's list. So on the agenda today, welcome and introductions. You've heard who's behind the big green screen here. Isabella and I are going to share duties talking, and Liam, if he's able to join us on the planning process. We'll go through the timeline and then have most of the time available for questions that you have. And then anything that you ask is being recorded by Paul and Drew so that we have a record of the question. We can see if it needs to be addressed in the planning documents, etc. So you've heard who we are. Here's our photos, our titles, and a very cute bird. So I will pass it over to Isabella, who's going to be talking about MRCA and giving an introduction to her organization and the preserve.
Hi everyone, good afternoon again. A pleasure to be here representing the MRCA. So the MRCA is a local government public agency and a joint powers authority that includes a partnership between the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy, the Conejo Recreation Park District, the Rancho Simi Recreation and Park District. MRCA manages more than 80,000 acres of parkland that it owns or that is owned by the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy. It provides operations, ranger services, fire prevention and protection services, and community-based planning, like this project, to improve its parks and encourage all Southern Californians to explore nature. Let me see if I can control the screen and move it down. Whoops. Looks like I can't move the slides, Melanie. I'm sorry.
So click once in the center of the screen with your mouse and then try again.
Yes. Tried the rice. I think I might have to ask you to do it.
Okay.
Hold on. Are you? Thank you very much.
Yep.
So the MRCA's mission is to complement the work of other agencies protecting land in Southern California by using its unique abilities to acquire and improve open space and parkland. And specifically, the land acquisition of the Randall Preserve was made possible through a generous donation from Frank and Joan Randall, along with several other public funds from federal and state agencies, and therefore there are restrictions within the acquisition that require planning efforts to facilitate appropriate activities in this special open space. This open space consists of an extraordinarily diverse mix of habitats and also holds cultural significance as shared territory for local tribes. So we want to make sure that we are planning appropriate uses for this open space. Just next slide. The Randall Preserve is a 387-acre parcel that is primarily located in unincorporated Orange County between the cities of Costa Mesa, Newport Beach, and Huntington Beach. There are many immediate communities to consider who are who will be within walking distance or a short drive. Some green space connections are Talbot Regional Park and Fairview Park to the north, and the Santa Ana River and the Santa Ana River salt marsh that borders the property. There are connections that can make the Randall Preserve a regional destination, specifically its proximity to the PCH, the Santa Ana River Trail, and the Banning Channel Bikeway. Next slide. While we are still in the planning process and the community commenting period is happening later this year in May and June, there are stewardship goals that are guiding the planning process for the property. There's a strong focus on open space and conservation that will complement public uses through passive recreation, while considering wildlife and habitat for non-human users as well. Just a quick note on where the property is currently. The previous oil operator is presently undertaking a 2 to 3 year process of remediation. So during this time, no public access is allowed on site. Just next slide.
Oops.
The land acquisition agreement placed MRCA as the title holder with the requirements to develop a property management plan that encompasses a resource management plan, a tribal access and engagement plan that both collectively inform a public access plan. And CCA has funding for several of these plans, but those grant requirements further add a separate but related coastal resilience strategy. And the planning process is informed by professionals, specialists, tribes and tribal members, and the local community. This will result in the creation of multiple plans. Just as the graphic suggests, we view this as a holistic approach in which the plans inform each other and we don't consider them separate documents. And so we'll just go to the next slide and I'll pass it back to Melanie.
Great, thank you. So as Isabella said, MRCA and CCA are in partnership on this project, and we have received funding from the Trust for Public Land, specifically focused on community engagement, and then the Wildlife Conservation Board and the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation to create the 3 plans: the Resource Management Plan, the Coastal Resilience Strategy, and the Public Access Plan, which we actually see as a chapter of the Resource Management Plan. And then the Tribal Access and Engagement Plan is funded separately from the State Coastal Conservancy. So this is our shout out to our funders. So on to the first plan, the Resource Management Plan. It's going to include a lot of the typical things that you find in a planning document for a property, but the focus is biology. So we're trying to understand where the habitat values are, the special status species, and even potential restoration opportunities. This helps us then lay the foundation for the public access plan to figure out where folks are going to be allowed to be and what needs to be off limits, whether it's permanently or based on seasonal changes or migration patterns or breeding season, things like that. We have a lot of habitats on this property, everything from salt marsh to freshwater wetlands to vernal pools, and some non-native plants like grasslands and pampas grass, things like that. So this map simply shows you that there's a lot happening on the upland and the lowland. And then this is actually a documentation of some of the special status species from back in the day when the property had a development proposed on it. This map looks a little bit different now with different areas being covered by species because we know that they move. We have 18 sensitive, threatened, or endangered species on the property, which is a lot considering its location, surrounded by 8 million people within an hour's drive, but a lot of them could use sensitivity and kid gloves in terms of the care so that they maintain the diversity on the site as well as hopefully grow populations. And as I mentioned before, we've got 2 kind of distinct areas. The uplands has kind of coastal sage scrub and cactus scrub, and then the lowlands has opportunities for wetlands, freshwater, and saltwater marsh, as well as potential for tidal wetlands if we're successful in our conversations with the Corps in terms of bringing in water from the Pacific Ocean through their slough next door. And at this point, Liam, I'm going to let you introduce yourself, who you are, who you work for, and then jump right into the tribal plan.
Thank you, Melanie, and I apologize everyone for being late. I got super sucked into a phone call and did not realize that this call had started in the background. So I'm here now. Thank you for your patience. But so hello everyone. My name is Liam Walsh. I'm from the Rincon Band of Liceño Mission Indians, and I'm the Tribal Engagement Officer for the Mountain Recreation and Conservation Authority. I am the project lead for the Tribal Access and Engagement Plan at Randall Preserve. And essentially, at a bird's eye view, the Tribal Access and Engagement Plan is an opportunity for MRCA, the local government agency who owns this property, to essentially set up a framework and plan out different processes that will advance co-stewardship models with tribal governments that are culturally and ancestrally affiliated with the property formerly known as Banning Ranch, Randall Preserve. The TAEP, which is shorthand for the Tribal Access and Engagement Plan, will essentially be a large-scale planning document that overviews all of the special use privileges that we are hoping to endow to the tribes that are culturally affiliated with the preserve, both federally recognized and non-federally recognized. And if there are any questions as to what those designations mean, I will make sure to take them later. But let's move forward one slide. So our consultation, methods that we're engaging in are very, very exhaustive for this process. We're not just serving as a government to government agency consultation where it's just us and the tribal government. We're pulling in cultural advisors, specialists that are retained by the tribe either as staff or just as community members who may have more knowledge than the next person. We're using co-working sessions, roundtable discussions, and tribal government advisory groups, all to help and aid in the decision-making process for this. And really the goal is to have a win-win solution whereby we are able to advance traditional ecological knowledge, which is a term that is kind of a coverall for traditional techniques of environmental maintenance, and how we can make the preserve a healthier place, not just for the humans that are going to use it, but all the animals and the plants that exist there as well. So we're trying to find a suitable way to do that that will allow tribes to exercise as much sovereignty and as many rights as they can over their traditional homelands, while also staying in line with all the different compliance pieces at the preserve, as well as making sure that all the entities that are stakeholders on this project regarding the remediation are not absolved of their obligations to make this a healthier ecosystem. I apologize, I'm not a biologist by trade, so if I'm misusing any of these larger environmental science words, feel free to correct me. But let's move forward to the last one. Just really quickly, some of the biggest pieces of the Tribal Access and Engagement Plan are going to be solicited from tribal governments as contracting opportunities. So essentially what we're going to be doing is having the tribes really drive the process in the specifics of how restoration plans are going to be executed at the correct time in the future. And some of the largest pieces of this are the ethnographic report, which has already begun, the reburial protocols that we're hoping to advance on the property, cultural burn plans for cultural fire, good fire. Other people may have heard prescribed burns or prescribed fire. It's slightly different than that. If you have questions, I'm more than happy to answer. Traditional ecological restoration and maintenance, that's kind of just a coverall for anything that may not be explicitly listed here. Cultural gatherings, so that would be any kind of gathering that is traditional in nature to that tribal community. It could be private, it could be open to the public. That's up to the discretion of the tribes. Traditional structures, both private and exhibition structures for public education. Public education efforts, so like guided docent tours by tribal members, or just partnering with tribal-based nonprofits to do community workshops to bring more awareness to the history of the site. And then private and public traditional events. So that would be things like powwows or annual events that honor the heritage of Randall Preserve, Ganga, Banning Ranch, whatever you want to call it. But that concludes kind of the synopsis for the Tribal Access and Engagement Plan. I'll hand it back to Melanie.
Great, thanks. So another plan that we're creating is a coastal resilience strategy, and this specifically comes from our NIFWIF grant. And this particular graphic shows that the mean high water mark still impacts the Randall Preserve outlined in white. And so even without sea level rise, we're already having inundation onto the property. But when you add 3 feet of sea level rise to it, a lot more of the land gets covered by seawater. So we're definitely looking at this in terms of how are we going to make sure people have access to the property, can see the different habitats, but also we can account for the future changes that are going to be coming, not just in 10 years, but in 150 or 1,000 years. And then also as it relates to the high tide flood, we're also having impacts there as well. So the lowlands are definitely at sea level. The area has had a berm around it for a long while, and so the ocean hasn't had a chance to really penetrate into the property. But with our plans, that may be a potential. And then the last plan, like I said, is going to be a chapter of the resource management plan. It's the community access component. So this will be within the resource management plan. It'll talk about where it's appropriate for people to have access, at what time, what are the hours of operation, and then the types of activities. And as we learned from Isabella at the beginning, there are passive public recreation opportunities on the property. So one of the things we're trying to drill home with the public is that we're not going to be setting up basketball courts or a football field or pickleball. This is meant for nature and experiencing nature in a less impactful way. And as I discussed, the passive side of things, so typically, this is being defined as unorganized activities that are non-competitive and have low impact on the land. So examples, bird watching, photography, hiking, picnicking, things like that. We are very aware that this property has opportunities for access points with bike trails, so along the Santa Ana River and along PCH. And there are also, thanks to our friends at the Orange County Transportation Authority, a lot of bus stops nearby as well. So we're taking this into consideration as we figure out what are appropriate entrances to the property as well. I will tell you there's access along the Santa Ana River, as well as off of 17th Street, and one entrance along Pacific Coast Highway. I can't say that we were going to expand those entrances by any stretch, but we know those exist right now. And we're also very aware that Talbert is redoing its master plan, and there might be a connection opportunity there for public use. So just kind of a graphic of the low impact things that folks might be able to do on the property. Again, not high impact. And then just a brief overview of the time frame. So right now we are in a crunched time frame. We had 3 years to get these plans going. The grant deeds require that the plans be completed by the end of this year. And there was a lot of delays getting started, whether that was funding or MOUs. But the good news is we now have our contractor hired. Dudek is the lead on all of the planning. They are working very closely with Moffitt and Nickel and Tidal Influence for the coastal resilience component. They're also meeting very closely with Liam on some of the tribal meetings that are happening. And then Ariano Associates has been brought in to assist CCA with the public engagement. So we're in the research and writing phase right now. We're expecting by May 1st, the 3 documents that CCA is in charge of, where the public actually gets to comment, will be available May 1st through June 30th, and we will have 3 workshops. Dates to be determined, but I'm hoping by today we have all 3 dates locked in. So release May 1st is the goal. Middle of May would be our first community workshop. Early June would be our second one, and then mid-June would be our third one. So if you start reading the document, you'll get a chance to learn more, go back to the document. So there's a repetition or a cadence to this that we planned in. I'm also trying to take into consideration the fact that I never feel like I have enough time to comment on an environmental impact report. And so I want the public to feel like they've got plenty of time. So 60 days is what we can afford to do while still meeting our deadlines of getting this before the MRCA governing board for consideration and approval, hopefully in the fall. So the final plans we're hoping go before the MRCA board in December. And there are a lot of ways that folks are going to be able to contribute. This includes you, but for the public, we have a website. We're offering these events. We have comment cards available in our workshops. We're doing sidewalk engagements. We have surveys through an engagement platform, all sorts of things that folks can do. And so we're hoping through your resources that you're able to support this work because you align with it in some way. That's why you were invited to this meeting, and getting the word out, because the more people that comment on these 3 plans, the better the plans are going to be. Liam, I'm just going to let you mention about the tribal plan and how it's a more enclosed process.
Sure. Yeah. So the tribal access and engagement plan is really only concerning tribal communities that are culturally affiliated with the space in an effort to advance, obviously, the sovereignty, but also the self-determination of these tribal communities. A lot of the conversations surrounding what that plan will entail are really siloed. Tribal consultation as a whole, government to government wise, is confidential. So the information that has been shared in this presentation around the TAEP is not necessarily something that we can justify to the public without essentially exposing very sensitive information that may or may not endanger cultural resources that exist on site. So for that reason, a lot of the justifications, the processes themselves of how we come to certain conclusions and what we include in the report are not necessarily privy to the public. I will share everything that I can in terms of general information and what cultural significance some of these things hold to the tribal communities. But at the same time, I don't anticipate there being any public comment period for these plans as they relate to tribal access and engagement. And I think the only portion that will be publicly available for tribal input, at least for people to listen to, will consist of the Property Management Advisory Committee, on which there is, I believe, as of right now, 7 reserved seats for tribal governments to participate in.
Isabella, do you want to touch on that advisory committee real quick, or do you want me to?
Touch on it, but I did want to say, even though the TAP is a separate document, Liam and I work together very closely to make sure that tribal feedback is included in the resource management plan.
As part of the restrictions that came when the property was secured was the creation of a Randall Preserve Advisory Committee. So that's what Liam was referencing in terms of the 7 reserved seats for tribal representatives. MRCA is in charge of creating that, but we're working in close partnership with them, and they'll be reviewing the document and providing feedback, or I should say documents, and providing feedback as the items become available. So at this point, we're on to questions or comments. So nothing to see here. And I'm going to just conclude by saying thank you. I'll get rid of the PowerPoint slides now, and then any questions that you have, we are happy to either attempt to answer or answer, but we will certainly be taking notes on what those are.